Alright, here we are back for round 2. Nesting Raven. 0/4, you may sacrifice Nesting Raven to play a 1/1 Raven with flying. You can do that immediately, or you can hold on to it. I really like this card. It's got a lot of fun things going on with the gameplay of it. It's just a really good counter aggro card that eventually turns into a way to win the game, albeit a very, very small one. This is probably the best 1/1 bird that you can possibly play because it is a 0/4 most of the time. And that is something that, like, I think 0/4 is not a bad stat line for a draft environment. You feel pretty comfy with this. This is notable because you can play a Raven with flying and also get an Entomb effect or a sacrifice anytime that you like, which means you can trigger tributes, you can trigger any sort of other type of effect that cares about things dying, you can trigger anything that cares about things entering the battlefield, and one of the things that you can trigger is Hero the People. If you have a Hero the People down, you play it on 3, you sacrifice Nesting Raven, you have a 2/2 Hero the People with flying, which is the standard thing that we've been seeing with this. Hero the People is in the current draft packs. That's a really fun combo. I think this card has some potential in Expedition, and maybe in Ranked. Depends on how much you want to 0/4 for 1 in a Throne environment. I think that they are like really good blockades, and that allows you to slow down aggro quite a bit, but like what value you get out of Nesting Raven really sort of determines its benefits in like more advanced formats, and like for the most part, this card is going to get it removed a lot. But hey, you can potentially do some pretty cool stuff with it. It's a fun, like, Shadowlands Guide target. You can really make some blockades with these types of cards. And aggro is going to have a tougher time just playing, like, 3/3 units and trying to get through. So that's got some serious potential. Provoke the Dragons. Deal 2 damage, your dragons go berserk. We talked about this card before. I'm underwhelmed by it in Expedition and Throne, but I think it's pretty reasonable. A little bit better than the 1-drop and some other things going on with it, but by and large, like, it's an okay draft card that happens to play well with dragons, and Expedition-wise, you'll probably run it, but you won't feel super happy about it. Water Conjuring. Stun 2 enemy units, decimate, invoke. It's a flash freeze with invoke. This is very, very good. Flash freeze is just a really powerful fast spell. This is up there with that 4/4 endurance ability, although notably the 4/4 endurance ability beats it out because it unstuns a unit and also gives that unit a huge buff, so you lose the trick war if you're using it. But hey, it's still pretty strong. Flash freeze is a very powerful aggressive effect. It's a pretty powerful defensive effect, and it can be used as a trick to disable double blocks and get kills, which can lead to a 2-for-1 card advantage, and 3-for-1 if you're using the Invoke. Yeah, card's great. Love this card. Should be played in Draft, should be played in Expedition. I could see it being played in Throne. I haven't seen a stun deck in Throne in a very, very long time. And if Infinite Hourglass is still in the format, then like we probably won't see too much of it in Expedition, but it's got some potential. We'll see exactly to what extent people are going to be pushing on Endurance as a whole setup. I know that Throne's setup in terms of time is pretty even-handed lately, which means not a lot of infinite hourglasses or easy endurance options, but you'll still see accelerated evolution, you'll still see endurance in a lot of different places, so Water Conjuring may not be as strong in those situations. Brood of Eremot, 3/3 flyer, super solid staple draft card, doesn't really see play anywhere else. Love it, but like there's not too much to say about it. It's got a lot of health, so it defends pretty well while also being a good attacker. This is just the right stat line for a 4-cost 3/3 for a 4-cost flyer. Like overall, it's just a great common. You should play a lot of them. They're going to be pretty high picks, and they will do a lot for you, provided you have other things to back them up. Plagued Griffin. Flying, summon, play Electropy on an enemy unit. Corrupted 6, which means it sticks around for a long time, but it takes a while to play that Electropy again. Pops Aegises, pops face Aegises, which is super important because the Electropy will constantly damage people's face Aegis, which means that they can't keep a face Aegis as long as Plagued Griffin exists. I don't see this card existing in Expedition for any particular purpose, but it's an interesting card in Draft, and it's finally a reason to play Electropy, which was the most unplayable card in Draft previously. This card synergizes really well with that touch that gives deadly. It has a high stat line. It's good on defense. It costs not that much. Like, this is a stat line that you already know as being good from Tower Top Patrol. So Plagued Griffin adds that Electropy, which is a way to win the game on top of it. I think it's a pretty good stall card and a pretty interesting control card in draft environments. Expedition and Throne can't really justify it, but if you're playing curse heavy stuff, no, probably not. But still really interesting. Rune Marker. Mastery 4, your units with flying gets killer. I'm skeptical about this one. It is one of the more interesting ways to like block a unit while you are setting up for like aggressive flyers. People do not want to attack into Rune Marker. They are going to be really, really unhappy to attack into Rune Marker if you have any power up whatsoever, because if you're playing with a bunch of flyers and you have a Rune Marker on the ground, they're not going to want to give your flying units killer. But also, like, flying with killer, that's not that great a benefit. The stat line, it's not that great. There's already a 0/4 for 1 in, like, 2 different colors in this format, and, like, this is a shaman, so it has no tribal synergies. I'm just not sure if it really gets you where you want to go. Obviously, if you get the mastery, that's pretty decent, but you also have to have flying units down for that to happen, and you have to put a little bit of investment into a Rune Marker, which it's not that great. So I think that overall this card's pretty average, not going to see play in Expedition or Throne, and like, yeah, it's a blockade that you want for your flyers if you can't get anything else, but there's a bunch of other things that you'll pick before this to kind of like keep that sort of meaty meat wall on the ground. One of them being Meditation Trainer, which is quite strong in this format. Double Helix Drake. Flying, your spells deal +1 damage. Mastery 3, your spells deal an additional +1 damage. This is the best spell damage card that I think we've seen in terms of dragons, or in terms of like most things. The 3/3 for 3 is probably the best one, but Double Helix Drake is one of the more consistently like good on a couple of different levels. Like, it's reasonably survivable. It has the +2 spell damage instead of the +1 damage, which puts it on par with like Iceberg Warchief, although you have to get that mastery to make it happen, which means somehow buffing Double Helix Drake. Doesn't feel particularly satisfying. This is Expedition or Draft only. I like it in Draft. It definitely makes spell damage look pretty interesting, and as I said, there's a really good spell damage toolkit card in here in the form of that red 1-drop that deals 1 to each. So yeah, this card's got some potential. How much potential is going to be really dependent on like what other spell damage cards there are and whether or not it gets killed a lot, which I think it will in Expedition. So draft-wise, it's basically a draft card only, but I like it in Draft if you got the right synergies. Tainted Mark, one or more units hit the cursed player, draw a card. Definitely a good way to close out with these sort of big, goofy flyers that we've been seeing. We already see Electropy, we already see the 1/4 dragon. The 2 cards that we just reviewed are the reasons to play Tainted Mark. You want a bunch of like sort of survivable flyers. If you didn't get good flyers, but you do have bad flyers, you can use Tainted Mark to turn those bad flyers into a spell damage deck or a really interesting, just like weighty, heavy deck that can attack in very small amounts and control the board and just sort of get that advantage going. It's interesting in Expedition, it's interesting in Draft. It's too slow in Throne. It doesn't really do as much as, say, Sodi Wingbreaker, and I think Sodi Wingbreaker is a strong reason not to play Tainted Mark in anything, but if you are playing like the Kodash Sees All Curse deck, I don't know. I'm skeptical that you want this much card draw when you have Archgriffin Patriarch and Kodash Sees All in there. Like, at that point, you probably don't need another relic that does that kind of thing. So, we'll see. Entranced Cultist. Summon, give a unit quick draw, corrupted 1. Love this card in Draft. It's a really, really good way to give a lot of units quick draw, and really most of your units quick draw. You're gonna have to play around this card and kill it at times when your opponent like can't really use the corrupted if you want your opponent to not get a bunch of like quick draw effects. Combined with Exalted and a bunch of battle skill stuff, I think this is really interesting. It's a strong purpose card because it really sort of benefits all of that like unseen setup where you're looking for battle skills. Overall, I think it's a really solid draft card, and it has a little potential in Expedition. Urgent Missive, sacrifice a unit to play 2 1/1 cultists as a fast spell. I think this has potential in all 3 formats because you are just getting a lot of value out of a lot of different things. You have an easy sacrifice card that gives you more sacrifice fodder while triggering sacrifice-based effects. So you can get your Entombs, you can play a bunch of cultists to sacrifice to other cards, and then the cultists can get exalted off of Carved, or like they can like benefit from being the sacrifice outlets for High Prophet of Soul. There's a lot of different ways to use these types of internal synergies, and Urgent Missive really takes advantage of all of those. So yeah, I see this card in all 3 formats as being quite playable. In Draft, it's pretty okay. You really kind of have to get like a decent amount of stuff happening to get it working, but at the very least you get 2 cultists out of your opponent trying to play a removal spell on something, and that can be pretty obnoxious if you're looking for like a Marsh Dragon setup. So yeah, not an unreasonable draft card. Defile, kill an enemy unit with cost 3 or less, then steal it and put it into your void. Fast spell, so yeah, this has some comparisons with Defiance. Overall, not bad. I would say that like you do get to get a lot of advantage out of the card. Kill the unit permanently, which is a big deal. You steal the unit and put it into your void, which is a small deal. And overall, like it's quick and easy to play, and it targets basically everything that's aggro. So I don't think you're going to hate this. This is certainly something that allows you to play the sort of slow and controlling game. Combined with Eremot's design, you can set up a pretty unbeatable like aggro defense, but then you have to somehow find a payoff for it in the late game, so there's some potential for that to not be okay. I think Expedition is definitely going to play it. Throne is probably going to play it, and Draft, you definitely want this card. Like, it's just really, really good. It's a solid removal spell. It's very, very fast. It doesn't have a lot of influence requirements. It plays in everything. Take it if you see it. Switchblade Deadeye, Elf and Unseen, +2/+2 while she has a battle skill. We talked about this card a lot already, but yeah, solid synergies in all sorts of Unseen decks, and like a really good draft card. Good Expedition card as well. Unlikely to be in a Throne deck, but maybe you're playing something with battle skills and Throne. I think that there's not enough support for that, but we'll see what the legendaries are in the set. Felrauk's Infiltrator, deadly and unblockable, mastery 5, draw one of the top 5 cards of the enemy player's deck, and they discard the rest. Cool stuff. The deadly ability is probably the reason you're using Felrauk's Infiltrator, but if you can stick a weapon on this and steal one of your opponent's cards, yeah, that seems fine. It's a low-end Scorpion with a much more high-end finisher, so if you're playing weapon-based stuff and you just need something to kill a big unit, this is probably okay as a draft card. I don't love it in Expedition or Throne, like there's just too many things that can go wrong with it, it's too weak, but in draft you're okay with plopping this down as a defender and then like hoping that you get that unblockable mastery, but not trying too hard for it. You're willing to block basically anything with this card. Pack Conjuring, give a unit strength and health equal to the highest strength among units in your void, decimate and invoke, or plus strength, negative health, notably. So kills things, which is good. Generally pretty powerful. I wouldn't say the most powerful invoke card, but has a lot of flexibility. If you're playing like a sort of high cost deck, or you're trying to get to like an interesting, like more aggressive blue card, there are some ways that Pack Conjuring can kind of like have some interesting play involved in it. Overall, I would say it's not a particularly strong card, but it's definitely something you're going to want in Expedition because it is removal in Expedition, and that always matters. And the invocability is really strong. In Draft as opposed to Expedition. In Expedition, you probably don't play this. There's so many good shadow cards right now. A lot of good shadow cards, in fact, and this one doesn't seem like it's going to be particularly strong as an option. So, Skeletal Dragon, strength equal to the highest health unit in your void when you summon it. Tricky, not easy to use, but certainly has some potential. There was like a mentor card that did this sort of effect, where you would like mentor a unit and you get the strength equal to the highest strength unit in your play, and that was actually okay. I don't see any reason why Skeletal Dragon wouldn't be very good if you're using it to be a pretty aggressive option. The removal in this format is really good at killing flyers at the moment. There is a card that just deals 1 damage to 2 units. That makes it a little tricky to play in Draft, and I don't love it as much as, say, like the double red dragon that's got flying and reckless. But, like, yeah, it's a 3-cost dragon. You're not unhappy to play it in a Draft environment. You're not going to play it in Expedition unless you really, really, really need to have a 3-drop dragon. I think that's pretty unlikely, though, because it's not usually going to be, like, there are going to be a lot of situations where this might actually be forced to be a 0/1, and I don't really love that. Overall, I think it's mediocre in pretty much anything, and not playable at all in Throne. Darkmask Stalker. When a unit goes to the enemy void, Darkmask Stalker gets its battle skills. Mastery 12 discards the top 12 cards of their deck, which notably does give it a bunch more battle skills. What a fun card. I can see an Expedition deck running it, but it's not going to be like a first tier deck. In Draft, this card is insane. Like, it's just bonkers good. Your opponent has to silence it. It's got like it's an amazing scream target. It's really, really fun to put other battle skills on. It forces really, really bad blocks the turn that it comes out. So if you play it and then you attack into a bunch of your units, your opponent's more like unusual units, they're not going to love trading, and you're probably going to get some damage through, which is a big deal because Darkmask Stalker also does well on defense. I like this card overall. It's not like an amazingly strong card in Draft environments, but it's pretty good, and like it's really, really well statted for what it's doing. In Expedition, I find it unlikely, but certainly unseen battle skills wouldn't mind it. So there's some potential there to make a really interesting Dark Mass Stalker. Victor's Feast. Create and draw a Power Burst, a 0/1 Totemite, a Treasure Trove, and an 8/8 Giant. I'm very sad we haven't played with this card yet, because it's so fun. Power Burst, Totemite, Treasure Trove, and Giant. I believe the Totemite costs 1, so you can use the Power Burst to immediately make a Totemite to block, and then you can Treasure Trove and start setting up for the Giant, or you can save the Power Burst for the Giant. This card is just like... it's so fun. It gives you 4 cards in total, which is just interesting. It immediately activates, say, like, the Cook guy, the Yeti Cook Master, which is just like that's like a good solid 12 damage on that card. That's kind of neat. Like, none of the things it's doing are super broken or ridiculously powerful, but I see this card being played in Expedition a lot, and I see this card being played in Draft a lot as well. I think it's a pretty strong draft card, pretty fun and interesting Expedition card, and like Throne would play it too, because like you'd be screwing around with it. It wouldn't be a good deck, but you'd certainly be happy to have it. So like maybe you could get like a big spell thing going on. This could be like a Caldera and Cradle type card. I don't know, there's a lot of weird potential for it. Certainly the ability to create 4 cards on hand is something that some decks are gonna want, even if you aren't doing anything crazy with it. Like you could play this with like Lin Ray and discard your entire hand and get like 4 new cards. Or Caleb, do the same thing. There's a lot of potential for this card in combo decks, and it's just fantastically fun to draw and play. So yeah, I don't see any reason why this card doesn't see play in all 3 formats. It's not going to be good in Throne because it's so slow, but hey, who cares? It's great. Keeper's Shield, Spellcraft 3, play Reinforce. We talked about this one already. Pretty okay weapon. I actually like it even similarly to the much better card Sword of Ikaria. Like, it's not amazing. Like, certainly a 3/5 weapon for 6 is not that great, but the flexibility does give it a little bit of charm, and you can do some interesting things with it overall. I would definitely pick this up in Draft. It's a very powerful card in that format. Spellbound Vestige. Oh, we are already into the hybrid cards now, so let's go ahead and talk them all up. Spellbound Vestige, your dragons cost 1 less. Your spells deal +1 damage while you have a dragon. So that's an interesting card, but not necessarily in a draft format. You do need to get dragons to get it going, and if you are playing spell damage, then you're pretty happy to do so. Like, there's spell damage dragons in this format, and they're cheaper if you're playing Vestige. So if you have enough synergies for it, go for it, but most of the time, no, not so much. In Expedition and Throne, yeah, this card is super playable. You can pick it up with a lot of different tutor effects. It's fairly cheap, and it makes dragons cheaper, which is a big deal, at relic cost, which is also a big deal. Throne has a lot of relic destruction that makes this very unlikely to see play, but hey, maybe we'll see some cool things happen with it. Premature Burial. The enemy player chooses 2 of their units to save, then sacrifices the rest. This card is unplayable in Throne. I think it's pretty bad in Expedition. In Draft, you're certainly not unhappy with like a kind of one-sided board wrath. But yeah, the 2 units to save are gonna be their 2 best units, and those are gonna be the 2 units that are bothering you the most. So unless you have a go-wide like kill option, this may not be the card for you. I don't even like it in Draft, but I have seen it played on me in Draft, and it was pretty good. It got 2 units, and those 2 units were important, and I didn't like get to like make a huge Exalted thing happen. So yeah, like, I don't know, this enables too many Exalted strategies. It's not going to be very playable just because Exalted is such an important thing in Draft, and this is something that doesn't make that worth it. Whew. Yeah, a little bit of a cold coming on, maybe. Majestic Skies, your units with flying have +1/+1. We talked about this already. It's an Obelisk for Flyers, which makes it playable in all 3 formats and very powerful in all 3 formats. You're pretty happy with this card. Eremot's Machinations. Play a 1-cost, a 2-cost, and a 3-cost unit from your Void. They get +1/+1 and Overwhelm. A lot of build around in this in Draft, so there's certainly some potential there. Note that art. That is the Nightmare Eremot leaning into that is the Eternal Throne right there. in Zolta. I think there's been like a little bit of discussion of it being in the crater, and now we have like Eremot leaning over, which, yeah, I don't know. This card's art is really, really neat. So, and also it makes Eremot look a lot scarier than Eremot ever has. I think Size really does a lot for this nightmare as far as things go, and like the sort of like galactic presence of him. He's very cool. Anyways, play a 1 cost, 2 cost, and 3 cost with +1/+1 and Overwhelm. That's a pretty cool ability. I think if you can set this up, you're pretty happy with it in Expedition, you're pretty happy with it in Throne, you're pretty happy with it in Draft. But in all of them, you really have to have that synergy, so it's not like a first pick or anything. I think in Draft, in Draft you want this. Like, this is just like, this is too much value offered, and like, you're gonna have 2 cost units, you're gonna have 3 cost units. Just those 2 things are fine. If you can play Eremot's Machinations without having all 3, which I believe you can, then yeah, you're pretty happy to do so. And if you're playing a really aggressive Xenon deck, geez, this card's ridiculous. Reborn Master, Endurance. Your units with 2 or more battle skills have +1 strength. Yeah, that rally effect makes it viable in Expedition. In Throne, you'd really have to have like a very specific aggro deck, and we talked a little bit about some of the cards that might be in that deck, but Unseen, I don't see them being very viable in that format. So, but yeah, this is looking like a really strong purpose card. Does a lot of different things. You want it in Draft because it's just got a great stat line, an already good skill, and a rally effect for 2 or more battle skills, which is something that you'll see a lot in this format. So certainly quite solid. Tokens, they're all good. You want them for like Draft, but not really anything else. They are depleted, which is usually not a great thing. If you're playing 3-color, you can kind of justify them, but most of the time you don't want to do that. I think in Expedition, where crests don't exist, tokens are perfectly fine. In Throne, no. Display of Creation. Draw 2 random sigils from your deck, or silence each attacking enemy unit. They get -2 strength this turn, or give one of your units +2 strength, gain 2 armor. So the draw 2 random sigils from your deck is extremely good. The silence each attacking enemy unit and they get -2 this turn is extremely good. And the give one of your units +2 strength and gain 2 armor is whatever, it's fine. You're certainly not going to be unhappy with it if it gives you the reach to win the game. This seems like a pretty strong display. The random sigils obviously don't fix anything, but if you're playing display, you already have all 3 colors, so who cares? You're still getting a bunch of power. You get to silence each attacking enemy unit, which is definitely something that is a big deal, because if you're getting attacked by a lot of different things, that's something that you really care about. This is a card that actually kind of makes like the aggressive Elysian deck look a lot worse, although that deck is playing 4 Daring Griffins, so you might not get to play it when you want to play it. So anyways, the card is okay. I really think it's a good answer to some aggro lists, and the silence ability on it is just really strong. Might make people think twice about running Borderlands Lookout in their deck, and I'm excited about that possibility, because that card is going to punish everyone playing 3-color if that card continues to exist in the format. Edge of Prophecy. Summon double Edge of Prophecy strength and health, 7 cost, 3/3. So it's a 7 cost 6/6 if you don't get any sort of buff on it. And if you get any other types of buffs on it, it is at least a Sword of the Sky King. That card's real good. I think that card's going to see play in Expedition. I think it's going to see play in Throne, where Sword of the Sky King has kind of fallen out of the meta, but like the offer of like a 10/10 Sword of the Sky King doesn't seem like such a bad deal. So if you're playing with some Warcry options, you're playing with something that buffs your units in some way, you're playing with a Karya, like, yeah, this card's good. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. It's the best possible Karya hit. Like, what do you get out of this? A 16/16 weapon? Oh, that sounds very satisfying and very annoying at the same time. I like this card a lot. I think it's just straight better than Sword of the Sky King in a lot of different ways, and Sword of the Sky King is, while not as playable card as it used to be, still an extremely good card that you're more than happy to be running with. Like, this is a cool card. It's easy to get 1 Warcry on it, or to buff it with something. Like, if you Tinker Apprentice this, it's a Sword of the Sky King for 7, and like, that's, you know, that's pretty alright. There's gotta be some synergies with it to really make it work, but a 7 cost 6/6 is not a bad weapon in Draft. Super good pick in Draft. It's in Expedition. A 7 cost 6/6 is not a bad card in Expedition. You're absolutely happy to take that. If you're in Throne, you can't play it as a 7 cost 6/6, but you're going to have so many internal synergies with this that it's going to be wild. So yeah, no, this is great. Seems amazing. If you rise to the challenge board, it is a 10/6 weapon. that's not a bad stat line. There's some cool things for it. Like, yeah, I don't know. This card's really, really awesome. And Armory is coming back in red, yellow, and green. Creation has kind of got the Armory setup really kind of locked down. Destruction, same thing. Display of Destruction. We talked about this one. Lots of fun. Cool card. Destruction is definitely where I'm at. I think I've been mistaking Menace for Destruction, and I apologize for that. In pretty much every situation where I said Menace, I did mean Destruction, because that's red, yellow, and purple with the sacrifice abilities. I assume Menace is where dragons are. Awakened Gorger. At the start of your turn, sacrifice a unit. We talked about this one as well. Lots of extra strength to it. It has the ability to really roll a game with Kairos, and that's got some potential in Expedition, but you really kind of need it to work in that way. I don't think it's awful in draft. Like, a 9/9 is a pretty big deal. You need some units to sacrifice, but there's a lot of ways to generate sacrifice tokens. And then, like, the constant power that you're getting off of it, as well as the ability to just sacrifice it if you're in a pinch, is, like, a decent way to get yourself up to 9 and play something ridiculous, which, I mean, maybe you want to do that in Destruction. That seems pretty wild. Okay, yeah, Menace is dragons. Good to know, good to know. Creation is Armory. Destruction is the ramp and sacrifice strategy. Good to know. Display of Menace. Deal 1 damage to each enemy, or kill an enemy relic and give relics in the enemy voidbound, or sacrifice a unit to draw 2 of the top 4 cards of your deck, and bottom the rest. Yeah, there's a lot of good things happening here. So this is the first Reverberating Strike that's playable, because it's Reverberating Strike attached to a display at fast spell speed, so spell damage-wise, seems pretty fun. Kill a relic and give it relics in the enemy voidbound. That's the voidbound part isn't that important, but the kill a relic is really important. Having relic destruction attached to a display is a big deal. That's not something that you're going to be worried about. The fact that this card is going to have 3 very flexible modes is pretty important. And sacrifice unit to draw 2 of the top 4 cards of your deck, bottom the rest. That's really, really powerful. You get your choice of 2 cards. You get a draw 2 at fast spell speed. It's a Devour for 3, which is not quite as good as, say, a Wisdom of the Elders for 3, but does allow you to trigger a lot of different Exalted and otherwise, like, interesting abilities. I think this may have the contention for the strongest display of the 5. There's a lot of good things happening with it. Display of Purpose is definitely not competing. Display of Creation is okay on that front. Menace may actually be the strongest of the 5 that we've seen. So yeah, no, it's a really, really good card. I think it sees play in all 3 formats, and you want it in all 3 formats because it just does so many different things. Tolek is not a draft card, but there he is. Razorpain Hellkite, flying, +2 strength for each treasure trove in your void. Pay 8 to deal 1 damage for each different name among your dragons. Kind of a fun draft card, kind of a fun expedition card. The huge damage on it is really interesting. If this card had charge, it would be completely disgusting. So if you can find a way to give it charge, say Soulfire Drake, then hey, yeah, you can do some pretty neat stuff with this. Finish your game with a Razorpain Hellkite. But it doesn't have Overwhelm either, so I think it's unlikely to see a lot of play in Expedition or Throne. Expedition certainly doesn't have a lot of reason not to play like a very aggressive large dragon, but this is in Carvet space, this is in Soulfire space, this is in space where you have a lot of different things happening, and the pay 8 ability is like really bad, actually. Like, really bad. Like, the chance that you're going to have a bunch of differently named dragons on the board and not have already won the game is very unlikely. In every situation where different names among your dragons matters, you're not going to have 8 free power and also be winning the game. I don't even know why that card text is on there, really, because like there's just no way to pay 8 to deal 1 damage to each different name of your dragons. This could be pay 4 and be fine. I mean, like, yeah, I guess like if you're paying 10 for the card and you're dealing like, what, 3-4 damage to somebody? It's just an unplayable line of text. In draft, it's relatively playable, and I think that's kind of where this card belongs. Like, it's just a really fun card if you're playing a bunch of different dragons and trying to set up treasure troves, and like that gives you a solid finisher that's a pretty good flyer to boot. So solid Menace card on that front. Really, really interesting things going on. Overall, seems quite powerful, but yeah, nothing too crazy happening there. Token of Tradition, which brings us to Tradition. Put an enemy unit into its owner's hand that increases its cost by the highest cost among your relics. Silence the enemy void, or give one of your units +2 strength and killer. This one's pretty flexible. I think that +2 killer ability is actually quite good and like really triggers a lot of mastery stuff, allows you to do some interesting things with Exalted. Like most of the like unseen shenanigans that are happening here, don't mind Tradition at all. This seems pretty interesting. Silencing the enemy void, that's worthless but good in specific situations. So if you're seeing a lot of like aggressive resurrection stuff, Display of Tradition feels pretty fun on that front. Put an enemy unit into its owner's hand, increase its cost by the highest cost among your relics. That's a weird bit of text, but a bounce ability is very good against Exalted units. And so yeah, this card has some flexibility as a defensive answer in slower control setups. I don't know really what Tradition is supposed to be invoking here. Like, I don't have a strong idea of this faction as opposed to the other four, but like overall this card's kind of mishmash of weird abilities does get you there. I think it's a reasonably strong display. It might even be the third strongest in the list, but overall you just want it because it's a display. You don't want it for too many other reasons. Sorcerer's Wand. Yeah, this is kind of cool. I think we talked about this card already, but it's a flexible draft tool, and maybe it sees play in Expedition, probably not. It's broken right now, so be careful with it. I think it only triggers some of its modes at the moment, but there should be some bug fixing happening very soon. Now we come to Purpose. This is my favorite faction at the moment since it's very battle skill concerned, and that tends to lead to a lot of random and interesting stuff. Display of Purpose is also like a really fun display. You get to steal a relic, which is great relic destruction, if it costs 3 or less. Okay, I don't know if you play the relic or not. I seem to recall Burglarize puts it into your hand. Let's look at that. Well, we can look at that later. But like, yeah, if this puts it into your hand, it's fine. If it puts it into play, ooh, that's super good. Give one of your units +1/+1 and Exalted as a fast spell is an insane draft option and a pretty dang good Expedition option. You can do some wild stuff with this and build some crazy Voltrons. It's really, really solid. And then on top of that, deal 7 damage to an enemy unit played this turn. That is traditionally not a very strong effect, but it's very good removal that kills most everything Ice Bolt style in the format, which, yeah, you want to be able to do that. Display of Purpose gives you that option while also giving you the option to build a bunch of your more aggressive strategies. That flexibility is really important. I'd rank this as like the second or third strongest in the set. So Agent of Purpose, pay 2 and exhaust Agent of Purpose to kill a cursed enemy unit. This is the end of our list. And give Agent of Purpose its battle skills. All right, we gotta redo this one because I got thrown by the art and I got really tongue-tied, but we need to talk about it. So 6/4, pay 2 and exhaust Agent of Purpose to kill a cursed enemy unit and give Agent of Purpose its battle skills. This card does, of course, build into a big monster if you can get enough curses down. There's a lot of hard work that needs to be put into it, which doesn't make it viable for Throne. Could be fun in Expedition, but probably not good, and in Draft it's certainly like, it's a big enough pile of stats, and it can become a scary enough unit that it's pretty fun for an unseen elf. So in this art, we have a character who is dressing up in a dress to infiltrate a place where there are a bunch of people dressed in fancy dresses so that they can poison someone. They're not very sure of themselves. They're looking off, kind of paranoid to make sure that no one's looking, but they're not looking in the right direction. They're basically like missing the people behind them who have clearly noticed them, and also they have this like problem where one of them is looking directly at them while they poison someone. The other person is kind of shielding them from the person with their arm. All of that leads to a depiction of cross-dressing and drag where it's associated with foolhardiness. You are dressing to basically make this person look foolish, like they're not doing a good job at being a spy, and they're dressing and drag to do it, which I think is not a good way to approach a character who is in a dress who would look otherwise like a queer character or a person dressed in drag. I think that's like just not super great in terms of like generally like not being offensive, generally being like good at like being good about depicting people. I think it kind of leads to some really negative connotations around cross-dressing, and like honestly I think this person looks fabulous in a dress. Like this is actually like a really well-dressed person, and I think that they have like some good things going on with that, but like yeah, the way that the card is depicted really bugs me. I would love to see this person partying in a different card and having a good time. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I hope that they change the art for this card. There's just like a few too many problems with it, but yeah, I want to see more cards with like weird art like this too, because I just want to see more like queer characters in Eternal. That's my thoughts on it. Yeah, so that we'll get back to the wrap up now. All right, that's the end of the list. Those are all of the new cards. We are looking forward to the set releasing next Tuesday, so we will see you all then. This should be a pretty fun time, and I hope that you enjoyed this list. So we will see you all next time, and have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for watching, and cheers.